This is the Aftermarket Radio Network.
Welcome to Speak Up Effective Communication here on the Aftermarket Radio Network. I'm your host, Craig O'Neill, and I have a great guest with me today to discuss the topic of the importance of daily huddles. With me today is my friend Josh Parnell, CEO and founder of Limitless Leadership. I'm so happy to have you here today, Josh. I'm so happy to introduce you to our audience. Go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Craig, thanks so much for having me. I'm honored to be here. So excited to talk about this particular topic with you. As you shared, I'm founder and CEO of Limitless Leadership. And Limitless Leadership is a coaching company in the automotive repair space, but we're a little different than others. And it's because we really focus on people first. And not to take anything away from the amazing coaching companies that are out there, because we are big believers and friends with many of them. What we do know is that we can bring a particular vein of coaching that is currently non-existent in the automotive repair space, which is leadership-focused coaching. And so we focus on leadership as well as performance coaching, as well as technician coaching. And so kind of your one-stop solution to coaching. And we primarily work with service managers and technicians. So we like to say that we're going to give the shop owner the gift of time, because we know how much time it takes to grow and develop people. And so glad to be here and excited to talk about daily huddles with you.
Oh, that's great. Thank you, Josh. And let's take a moment and thank our sponsors who make everything possible on this podcast. Looking to take your shop to the next level of quality service, team culture, and overall profitability? At the Institute, we provide personalized coaching that aligns with your goals of financial stability, excellent customer service, and employee satisfaction. Our priority is helping you establish significant and sustainable progress. We work with you to create strategies that reduce the stress of running your business, improve your quality and performance, and optimize your profitability. Experience the benefits of professional coaching by visiting wearetheinstitute.com/business-assessment. Hey friends, as you know, I'm a proud member of the AutoFlow team, and let me tell you, we've changed how business is done for auto shops everywhere. We support your client experience before, during, and after the work is done. Imagine this. Timely updates sent directly to your clients, branded digital vehicle inspections, and seamless communication from start to finish. That's why shops love AutoFlow. And hey, with those 5-star reviews rolling in, you'll wonder how you ever managed without us. Take an important next step and take your auto shop to the next level. Visit www.autoflow.com. Get on board with an AutoFlow trial. Are you ready to meet your perfect auto repair shop management software partner? Well, say farewell to the days of transactional relationships and hello to a true partnership that elevates your business. The number one all-in-one solution is AutoLeap. You're not just getting software, you're gaining a dedicated ally committed to your success. AutoLeap will help you sell more, save time, and delight your customers at every turn. From scheduling appointments to creating estimates, generating invoices, managing technicians, and seamlessly syncing with QuickBooks to keep your records updated. Experience the difference a true partnership makes. Visit Autoleap.com and book a demo today. Autoleap, your trusted partner for success. Want to see your auto repair shop thrive? Are you looking to drive more customers to your auto repair shop? Let ShopDog Marketing be your guide. Our customer-first approach, combined with AI-driven creative content, ensures top rankings. Dominate mobile-first and voice search with our specialized expertise. Reach out to ShopDog Marketing today and start growing your business. Don't miss out on this chance to boost your business. Visit shopdogmarketing.com. Inbound has exclusively served independent auto repair shops with expert communication solutions for years. Our robust VoIP platform ensures you stay connected while our industry-leading AI analytics take your business to the next level. We provide the tools you need to understand your customers and optimize every interaction. Choose Inbound for proven expertise and unmatched innovation. Visit callinbound.com and discover the difference we can make. Okay, we're here with Josh Parnell from Limitless Leadership, and we are talking about the importance of daily huddles. Before we go into this a little bit further, Josh, I think it's important to mention that we met through our mutual association with Christian Brothers Automotive. Autoflow is supporting the Mastering the Difference training conference that they put on. You as a trainer for Christian Brothers at an earlier point in your career. I had a great time hearing from you. I thought you did a great job. And I heard a lot more about your history at that point too, which goes back to the Air Force, correct?
That's right. That's right. Yeah, 20 years ago. So my story really begins over 20 years ago. After high school, I had hopes and dreams and aspirations of going to Hollywood to become the next Steven Spielberg. Now, clearly that did not happen, but I had a very strong interest in filmmaking at the time. And I found out that the University of North Texas in Denton near Dallas had a great radio, TV, and film program. So I planned on going to UNT for 4 years, but after just a year and a half, UNT said, "Hey, Josh, thanks for playing, but your grades are terrible." Clearly, I had a lot of growing up to do. Wasn't ready for school. This was around the time that 9/11 happened, and it got me thinking about joining the military. And I found out that videography was a career field I can do in the Air Force. So I went to my nearest Air Force recruiter's office, introduced myself, and my recruiter said, "Hey, it's great that you want to do videography. Just so you know, it's not available right now, but when you get into basic training, it will be. All you got to do is sign the dotted line." And so I'm like, "Okay, let's do it. Sign me up."
Everyone listening to this is already laughing at this point.
Exactly. Hey, UNT dismissed me for a reason, not the sharpest tool in the shed. Okay. So I joined the Air Force without a guaranteed job. And sure enough, I arrived at basic training and videography was still not available. And so I didn't know what career field I was going to go into. But an important part of the story is that everyone fires the M16 in basic training. I think now they fire the M4. At the time, it was the M16. And in order to become an expert marksman on the M16, you have to hit specific parts of the target at least 45 times out of 50 rounds. And I had never shot a weapon before entering the military. So I was a bad shot. I mean, I was such a bad shot that the range instructor threw an extra 30-round magazine in my rifle. So I did actually score a 45, Craig, out of 80 rounds. Now, the only people who knew that I shot 80 rounds were me and the range instructor. So even on my score sheet, it showed a 45 out of 50, which still to this day, I think technically makes me the worst, quote unquote, expert marksman in the history of the Air Force. But it's important that I share this piece because when they found out I was an expert marksman, they said, "Well, you're going to be a cop," which is military, it's security forces or military police in the Air Force. And so at that point, I'm thinking, that's not really what happened, but okay. Yeah, so I went and did a 4-year enlistment as a cop. I was stationed in beautiful Minot, North Dakota. That is backed by heavy sarcasm.
Yes. Yes. A large Air Force base Minot, very near the Minuteman missile
That's right.
silos too. Yeah.
That's right. So I'm from Texas. I currently live in Houston, but being a native Texan going to a frigid temperature like Minot, North Dakota was a bit of a culture shock to say the least. And so
that's not so bad. Well, that's an important segue to the topic of huddling.
That's right. Yeah, very good. Yes. Speaking of huddling, so I huddled in Minot for 4 years, and after a 4-year enlistment, got out, finished my degree, and eventually found my way into the automotive repair space when a great friend of mine contacted me about a open position as a corporate trainer with Christian Brothers Automotive.
Excellent.
And this was slightly over a decade ago. And I worked for Christian Brothers for almost 9 years, was there for nearly a decade, and grew so much through an incredible brand with incredible people.
Great organization.
You and I both know, Craig, we met at the ASTA Expo not too long ago, and we were both talking about how Mastering the Difference, that conference that you referenced, is always everyone's favorite event. No difference for me as well. It is an incredible event created by some incredible people. About a year and a half ago, I made a very difficult decision to enter this terrifying world of entrepreneurship. I willingly chose to leave a great job with great people, with benefits and security and safety, because I just felt like something was stirring in me that prompted me to do something different. Absolutely loving what I'm doing now. I loved what I did at Christian Brothers as well, but now I'm able to serve the automotive repair space in a much larger fashion, be speaking engagements, training, and coaching. And the bulk of our business, as I shared earlier, is one-on-one coaching. What we see is that we're able to give that franchise owner or that automotive repair shop owner the gift of time, and we get to create two things so that we can provide two things. We're creating safety and trust so that we can provide clarity and direction. Because as you know, Craig, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And
That's
we get
well
to
stated.
model this for our clients so that they can see exactly what it means to connect with their team. It's important that we talk about the importance of connection before content. And daily huddles is one way that we can achieve that goal.
Yeah, when we were talking about this, I immediately started thinking about the happier times in my family business on those busy weeks where there was a big push to get a lot done and there was a big need for the full team to be at their max effort. And the way we began those days was typically we would go to a little restaurant actually called the Gathering Place, and we would
Okay.
get a team breakfast at the Gathering Place. And it was a good conversation, typically laughter and other things. And then we segued into, all right, here's what's got to happen. Who's doing what? This is happening then, and those sort of things. And my gosh, when you have the momentum starting into the actual opening hour of the day, everyone's ready to go. Everyone's on the same page, and truly enjoyable to
Yes.
see the results that come from that level of teamwork.
You talked about momentum, and you also talked about the time of the day in which you have the daily huddles. And so in terms
Ah,
of frequency, I think I call them daily huddles for a reason, because I say, let's do them daily. And in terms of the
huh.
time, I think what you mentioned is very important, because some people will say, well, I'll have a daily huddle, but it might be after lunch. It might be after closing hours.
Or reviewing what happened perhaps in the day.
Correct.
Which one do you aim for when you're recommending this then? Is it the earlier?
I prefer the earlier. I like the concept of the preview and the review. In the
Okay.
mornings, you can do a preview of the day and a review of yesterday. But to your point, you're able to set the momentum and set the tone of the day in the daily huddle. I believe that when we can set the tone of the day and celebrate the wins from yesterday, what gets celebrated gets repeated. So how can we start the day and set the tone? The best way, in my opinion, is to do it in the morning.
That makes sense. As long as everybody's there.
That's right. And this is where expectations need to come into play, because I mentioned earlier, we get to create safety and trust so that we can provide clarity and direction. If you think about any job, Craig, that you've either left or lost, it's very likely that you didn't have both clarity and direction
Mhm.
from that job. As leaders, it's our responsibility and, quite frankly, our obligation to provide clarity and direction through definitive expectations and the standards in which we operate. And so being
Hmm.
able to provide expectations for your existing team members and your new hires, it's understood that we're going to have daily huddles at this time of every single day. So there's no surprises, there's no lack of clarity, there's no lack of direction if we are setting the tone even in the early stages of employment.
Yeah, and so that's really the objective. I think you summarized it very well, clarity and direction. This is not the only objective of the huddle. They may each have their own. What are you typically aiming at when huddles begun?
I like to set the tone, as I shared. I like to be able to use the huddles as an opportunity to publicly praise. There is always something we can find that someone on our team is doing well. Use the daily huddles as a time to publicly praise them. We've likely all heard the concept of publicly praise and privately admonish.
Yeah, yeah.
We don't want to use the daily huddle to call someone out in a negative way. Use that time to correct. Correction is for your protection, not your rejection. Use
Hmm.
that time through one-on-ones, or use that time. I like to call them toolbox talks, being able to have some coaching moments, if you will, outside of the daily huddles. I think it's important that we recognize how communication gets improved through the daily huddles. Craig, I think it's important that every shop owner knows that it's costing shops, poor communication is costing shops 18% of total salaries being paid out.
Let that sink in. Okay, poor communication is costing shops 18% of the salary that is being paid out
That's right. Total salaries per year. So let's just say that you
per
have a
year.
shop and you're paying out $1 million in salaries over the annual basis. If studies are accurate, which this is from a very reliable report in 2002 based on communication, it's costing you almost $200,000 when communication is not effective. And we know that when there's a breakdown in communication, voids tend to get created and negativity tends to fill those voids.
Mm.
And this is why we see, regardless of the industry, we see that 70% of employees are disengaged at work. And they're disengaged because they don't feel seen, they don't feel heard, they don't feel valued. Now, conversely, 80% of people are fully engaged when they have at least one meaningful conversation per week. And that doesn't necessarily mean with their employer, although I'd
Mm-hmm.
highly recommend it be with their
Yeah.
employer.
Why not?
Exactly, right? And actually, here's a question for you, because the question is why not? The answer for a lot of people is because is time. Time is the why not. Here's a suggestion or a concept to think about. I typically work with my clients on having bi-weekly one-on-ones. So today's topic is daily huddles, which we're going to talk more about here in a bit. But in terms of one-on-ones, I regularly encourage bi-weekly daily huddles. You think about a shop and the hours in which your team members are working there over 2 weeks. I mean, we're looking at least 100 hours, upwards of 120, 130 hours in a 2-week time frame. For any of us to say, I don't have time or I'm not willing to make time for 1 hour in 2 weeks with my team member, that says a lot about priorities. And I understand that there are a lot of priorities, but we need to recognize that when everything's a priority, nothing's a priority. And our greatest assets are our team members. We don't have to, we get to make time for our team. What you got, Craig?
Let me ask you this, because you mentioned time, and I think that could be offered as an excuse often. I
Correct.
think the underlying thing is a lot of times, even one-on-ones, but certainly in group conversations with the team, it is an arena that a lot of people are just naturally very uncomfortable with.
That's
And
right.
we talk about this a great deal. Chris and I, our CEO here at AutoFlow, we started the first class we did on effective communication was titled Speak Up. It's a harbinger for the title of this show. And we cite the statistic that 75% of all people have the fear of public speaking, glossophobia. And this is a form of public speaking. And what do people do when they're confronted with the potential of having to do something they're a little afraid of, or something that gives them a little anxiety? They'll avoid it.
That's
They'll
right.
avoid it. And so I wonder if you've seen this, I guess this would be my question for you, as you've worked with many shops. I feel I have seen this as well, but there are some shop owners whose voice, normally very confident one-on-one, quivers when they're in front of a larger group of people, even their own team.
Craig, we see it all the time. You're absolutely right. Time is a reason that they give me, but I also know that it's likely an excuse that they are using. So it's really about perspective. With perspective, the way that we view things drives the way that we do things. When I'm holding a client accountable and when I am providing calls to action for the sake of accountability and ultimately growth and development, I often get met with their reasons, but we talk about perspective and I share, hey, Craig, I love you, but you're saying this is a reason, but I'm hearing this is an excuse, and here's why. And so this is where we show some tough love in this regard.
Call it candor.
That's right. It really is candor.
Mhm.
Nothing changes if nothing changes. And in order to grow through something, we've got to be willing to go through something. And our belief is that we can't do it, or I don't want to do it for all kinds of reasons or excuses, depending on how you look at it. And I think a way that we can avoid the quote unquote uncomfortable or difficult conversations is to have a foundational conversation early on. When we can lay the groundwork, create a firm foundation built on clear expectations and standards that we've defined, we can lay out what I call 5 steps to effective communication. And those 5 steps in order, and stop me if you have questions.
No, let's hear. Start with number 1.
Number 1 is to assume positive intent.
Assumed positive intent. We talk about assumptions and not wanting to make assumptions, but
That's right.
What you're really saying in this context is default positive in your interpretations, right?
Very well said. We typically don't want to make assumptions for obvious reasons that we're all aware of. But if we're going to make assumptions, let's assume positive intent. Let's recognize that every person on our team, we all want them to feel heard, understood, acknowledged. Every person's voice should be heard. Their opinions do matter. Their ideas should be considered. And we're all human. We make mistakes. Sometimes things are not going to go as planned. We have to assume positive intent from all parties involved. And it's a two-way street.
It is a two-way street. And one of the critiques I often hear from shop owners lamenting some behavior issue on their team is, oh, so-and-so's just lazy. I think that's always a little bit of an assumption on their part, a very negative one, that they don't want to work. And I not found that to be true very often at all in this industry. You don't make it very far if you don't have some natural drive or initiative. I think that they failed to identify what motivates that person or what they are doing that they want to be doing. And there's all sorts of reasons for that. But yeah, don't assume positive intent.
That's right. I want to piggyback on what you just shared
Sure.
too. Just this concept or the thought that, well, this person is lazy. That's why they don't achieve X, Y, or Z.
Mm-hmm.
But this is a thought. This is a thought that this shop owner is having. And we know that our thoughts dictate feelings, our feelings dictate actions, and our actions dictate results. If you're not achieving the results you want to achieve, let's go back to the thoughts that you're having. You can question these thoughts and challenge these thoughts by having a foundational conversation with this team member, because it's very likely that this team member is experiencing something or going through something that's preventing them from rising to the level of preparation that you've likely tried to prepare them with. And one of the greatest mistakes any of us can make is assuming all of our thoughts are true. So what happens is we begin to operate under false pretenses and false thoughts, which drive our feelings, which are inaccurate. And the actions we take are indicative of unhealthy and illogical feelings.
Yeah, you're going to dive right into a topic I plan to dive into here very soon on anxiety, the current generation, especially being afflicted with higher instances of anxiety. And anxiety, different than fear. Fear is a rational response in many cases to an imminent threat, and anxiety is a imagined threat that is also eliciting a lot of those same reactions as fear. And if you're in a mode of anxiety, it's very difficult to default positive.
100% is very difficult. And there is some similarities with fear. We know that fear is actually just false evidence appearing real. And if you think about what fear is, like the similarity between faith and fear is that they both believe in a future that hasn't happened yet.
Interesting.
So for a lot of us, it's common for us to gravitate towards fear. And the reason being is because humans have up to 60,000 thoughts per day. And studies show that 80% of our thoughts are negative and 90% of our thoughts are repetitive. So we naturally gravitate towards the discomfort, the stress, the anxiety, the doubt, the concerns, the worry, and the fear.
Naturally gravitate to it, unconsciously gravitate.
Unconsciously. And here's the thing. We have to make sure that we are regularly getting comfortable being uncomfortable. And part of
I love that concept. Yep.
Well, Craig, like growth and comfort cannot coexist. What are we doing to ensure constant and continuous improvement and growth on a consistent basis? So the first step to effective communication, as we shared, was assume positive intent.
Yeah.
The second is to seek first to understand, then be understood. This is the fifth habit from the book, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Great book by Stephen Covey. I love, this is my favorite habit. I mean, I'm biased, but I was like, you know what, this is so good. I'm going to steal it and put it in my 5 steps to effective communication because it works. So many of us we're so ready to talk and tell someone what they need to hear.
Correct.
And I'm emphasizing that word tell for a reason. When we're telling someone something, we're speaking to them. We're not necessarily speaking with them. So I like to share information rather than tell information.
Oh, you're spot on. And here at Speak Up, Effective Communication, our show is titled this, but I like to remind the listeners first, listen up.
Yes. We do have to listen. When you think about it, when anyone hears the word communication, we all likely think about what's coming out of our mouth versus what's coming into our ears.
Correct.
And so when we can shift our focus and really shift our paradigm and recognize how important listening is, which I'm getting ahead of myself. That's actually the 4th step, which I'll get to here in a second.
Okay.
But listening is is one of the most important pieces of communication. But think about when we're seeking first to understand, then to be understood. We are often waiting to talk, right? And for a lot of us, there are multiple conversations happening for the one that's actually happening. Like it's the one that I'm having, it's the one that you're having, it's the conversation that I think that we're having, the conversation you think we're having.
Yes.
And there's just one conversation.
There should be just one conversation. And so this is a concept that needs to be brought up, and I plan to discuss a little bit further in the future as well. You have 2 primary forms of communication. You have asynchronous and synchronous. Asynchronous, you could think even as early as letter writing in the early 18th century between 2 scientists, but synchronous communication is what we're doing now. A video call is synchronous. In-person communication is synchronous. Generally, it's one-to-one or one-to-many, but it's happening now. It's happening now, and the reactions are simultaneous. Asynchronous, not so much the case in our age of digital communication, a little bit more of a challenge, and it can make it very difficult to be understood when you have the absence of that body to react to, that body, which for millions of years, people have had the skill to read a body in oral, immediate, here and now communication. That is not the world we're in today. And that's only lasted a few decades.
And what you're describing is also why we know that the biggest misconception about communication is the fact that it's actually happening. So what we haven't even addressed yet is you and we see each other talking right now. We're communicating with each other by sharing information with each other, but body language, tone of voice, voice inflection, enunciation, all of this goes such a long way. You and I, prior to going live on this recording, we both talked about the importance of standing up.
Yes.
Standing up to communicate. Yep. There's so much involved. And this is why, Craig, we see so many shop owners benefiting from limitless leadership coaching, because one of the challenges, in fact, often the biggest challenge that shops are facing, at the root of it, it is communication or a lack thereof. And as we all know, think about challenges in your relationship with your spouse, with your significant other, with partner. Most of the time, communication is the root of those challenges as well. So not only do we see, so not only do we see professional growth, we also see personal growth.
We talk seek first to understand before being understood. Classic concept of really focusing on listening. So number three is fall in love with asking questions.
Yes. Asking questions. This is one of the biggest opportunity areas that a lot of leaders don't capture, because what we are focused on often is providing directive after directive after directive. But that doesn't mean that we're providing direction. We talked about providing clarity and direction. We can provide direction through questions. And so a very simple 3-step roots to results coaching method works like this. I ask you a question, or we talk, I could ask you, hey, Craig, how are you doing? Or what's the status on this vehicle? Yeah. And that's the thing. That's typically going to be, so my natural response, regardless of your answer, whether it be a lengthy answer or a one-word, fine, good, or something like that, I'm going to say, tell me more. Tell me more is the second step. You're going to tell me more. And then regardless of what you tell me, I'm going to ask the awe question, AWE, and what else? And what else? Great, Craig. And what else? And Craig, man,
awe question. I've never heard that. I think that's great.
That's from a great book by Michael Bungay Stanier called The Coaching Habit. That is my coaching Bible that I've used for years. The awe question is one of the 7 important questions that he talks about in that book. But a very simple 3-step approach that we can all adapt and adopt in our shops is ask a question. And typically what we do is we ask a question, we get an answer, and then we provide a directive on that answer. My encouragement to you is to bite your tongue and say, tell me more. You're going to get more. And then you're going to ask that awe question, and what else? Every single time you ask, and what else, I promise you there's going to be something else. You could ask that question 5 times in a row. Eventually someone's going to say,
well, it's a classic place for this would be in an interview for a staffer. A lot of times, and I've told my kids this as they go out and venture into this world of first-time, part-time jobs. If you have a young manager, I told them, I promise you, they are as nervous interviewing you as you are to be interviewed.
Yes, that's right.
It's just how it is. And I still feel that as a manager. I've talked to countless people in interviews, and I think this is almost a universal for managers. They want to perform the interview well, and the other person wants to interview well. And the best way to get good questions to someone that you're interviewing is the tell me more, or describe for me, or open-ended type questions that are designed to get them talking and you listen. It will reveal to you the points where you can make a better, awe question.
That's right. You said something that's very important, open-ended questions.
Mm-hmm.
Something that I do coach my clients on is the importance of asking open-ended questions, because while I think it's important that we are showing up for our team, we're asking the right questions. When I talk about finding out how your team is doing, we can ask, Craig, you doing okay? Do you need anything?
Yeah,
can I get you anything? Man.
Yeah. No, I'm good.
and all those questions are simply yes or no response type questions.
Or habituated. You're kind of preconditioned to respond to that without wanting too much attention. There's probably 1,000 things you'd love to say, but you recognize this group doesn't have the time or maybe even the interest to hear about those things.
Exactly right. And so this is also why one-on-ones are so important, because you're making time, you're sitting down, you're saying, okay, take a breath. Hey man, how you doing? How you doing up here? I'm pointing to my mind. How you doing in here? I'm pointing to my heart. How are things going? I want to find out how you are doing, how Craig O'Neill, the husband, the father, is doing before Craig O'Neill, the amazing podcaster, the amazing auto flow guru. I want to find out how you, the person, is doing before we talk about content. Remember, it's connection before content. So I mentioned the third step is to fall in love with asking questions. The fourth step is to listen. If we're going to ask questions, we have to listen. And Craig, you and I both know there's a difference between hearing someone and listening to someone. If I'm hearing someone, I'm waiting for them to stop talking so I can tell them what I want to say. And if I'm listening, I'm receiving information, I'm processing information, and I'm utilizing that information to best serve that person.
Yeah. And that's the trick of being present today that is so very difficult, even for adults, not just like the younger generation who's been raised with electronic devices, but everyone, almost universally, everyone I know in the modern world today has expressed some form of feeling frazzled, feeling distracted, or just feeling a little bit not present in conversations, in a huddle, in a team meeting, or a one-on-one, or even absolutely, with loved ones and our spouses and our family and our kids in these stressful days of a shop. You've met teams like that too, where it's a tough business and they're having a real hard time just consolidating their day at the shop to transition to a happy experience in the home with a pile of stress on them that is really difficult to comprehend for a lot of people. But listening in that context of stress and pressure and all those things to the people you care about most is tough. And our wives are often the first ones to notice it.
That's right. I think it's a good point that you're making, Craig, that we have to make a choice. Two things I learned early on in my Air Force career is the two things we can control each and every day is our attitude and our effort. These are both choices we can make. Just like we have a choice to show up for our team, just to like we have a choice to make time when we don't quote unquote have time. Because imagine if we're not making time and we're not present in the conversation, how we're making that team member feel. One of my favorite quotes from Maya Angelou, she says, I've learned that people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel.
You got it. Yep.
And the interesting thing about that quote that I love, the irony of this quote is we're on a communication podcast right now. You're hosting a communication podcast, but the first part of that quote is, I've learned that people will forget what you said. Mm-hmm. However, it's our words that's going to prompt the feelings that are not going to be forgotten. So we have to be mindful of how we're asking the questions. Are they open-ended? Am I showing up? Am I giving you eye contact and giving you my undivided attention? Am I truly showing up for you in these moments? Because what many people are lacking right now is validation. And when you listen to someone and listen to them empathetically, empathizing with someone doesn't mean that we necessarily have to experience the same situation as that person, but it does mean that we can imagine their circumstances and accept their feelings without invalidating them.
Correct. And you can't fake true empathy. True empathy is something that if it's happening, it's there. And this is something I've noticed a lot of people having a difficult time with.
I think for a lot of folks, what we feel is we have our own stuff going on. And so this is why even in our coaching approach with Limitless Leadership, what we do is we go through a 3-phase process. We begin with self-leadership before we graduate into this phase of team leadership and team development.
Before you go into that, you mentioned two things you learned in the Air Force, attitude and effort. Did I miss the second?
No, those two things.
Those are the two things.
And attitude and effort.
Perfect. Got it.
Attitude and effort are the two things those are the two things that we can control each and every day is our attitude and our effort.
Correct.
When I say attitude, like here's an example. We know that not every day is going to be a good day, but we can still find the good in every day. We can choose positivity. We can choose to look at things a certain kind of way. It's not easy. In fact, some days it's very challenging, but we can still choose to have a particular perspective or an outlook based on and an attitude in relation to those things. The second thing with effort is we can provide maximum effort every day. I'm not saying 100%. Because on the days that we are sick or injured, something's going on, maybe we can't really provide 100% of our effort, but we can provide our maximum effort that day. And there's a lot of us who can provide 100% each and every day, and we're regularly giving 80. And when we talk about sunk costs, like poor communication, there's also sunk costs when people are disengaged at work, which we talked about earlier. And oftentimes it's through the daily huddles, as an example, that we can get people more aligned, improve that communication, which increases revenue. It starts with the intangibles to become the tangibles. That's really where we see the benefits of leadership coaching.
So number 5 on your 5 steps here.
Yes, sir. Number 5 is, I call it a 3-piece combo. It's stay positive. And there are 3 pieces I want to share about staying positive. Number one, go directly to the source. So when there is a situation, when there is a problem, we want to pair that with a solution, but we can go directly to the source. Many of us, let's say we come into work and something happens. Someone says something, maybe they seem a little frustrated or upset, but they're just being direct. They're focused on something, they're being direct. And I receive it a certain kind of way. And so I'm like, I go to Craig and I'm like, dude, Craig, do you see what John was talking about? Man, what's his deal? What's up with John? And I have this water cooler talk, this gossip, allowing and introducing negativity and toxicity to slowly seep in and slowly creep in. I don't have bad intentions, but I'm not handling it properly.
Right.
And so when we go directly to the source, we can determine what is really going on. Hey, Craig, help me understand. Remember, seek first to understand, then to be understood. Help me understand what's going on. How are you doing? How are things going? How can I help you? The second is to implement the no complaining rule. It's exactly the way it sounds. We don't complain here. We don't complain. Yeah. And if there is a problem, as I shared earlier, bring a solution with that problem.
This is a classic Dale Carnegie. Do not complain, criticize, or condemn.
Love it. I will mention, of all the steps, so the 5 steps: assume positive intent, seek first to understand, then to be understood, fall in love with asking questions, listen, this 3-piece combo of stay positive. All of these, with the exception of the very last bullet point, apply at work and at home. Craig, as a married man, when I bring a solution to my wife, every time she has a problem, I have learned that is not exactly what she wants every single time. Okay. So I'm trying to save marriages here, folks. If you're listening and you're thinking, wait, doesn't my wife or my spouse want a solution to all of the problems? No, sometimes they just want us to listen.
Yes.
Let's go back to the 4th step.
Absolutely true. And one of these episodes coming up, I'm preparing for this so that my wife and I can do this in a single room with a single camera with the right equipment to have this conversation together. But there was a version of Craig many years ago, which was burnt out, stressed out, and at his wit's end in the family business. And the difficulty that my state of mind was in coming home, from my wife's perspective, I think it's pretty important to be able to share that conversation and how important that our ability to communicate what was going on, what had to happen, a transition in career, as you described earlier in your own story, how challenging that can be.
Yes.
It's a lot, and you need to have a foundation for how to communicate things through that point. But it's not always about fixing the problem. And one of the things you'll hear me and my wife talk about when we go into that is a lot of times people will reserve sharing some things that might need to be shared out of a fear of an overreaction from the other person.
That's right. And it also ties into the shop, because you said the key word, foundation. We have to have a foundation. That's why I mentioned earlier, foundational conversations. When people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care, when they recognize that concept, difficult conversations don't have to be difficult. They know it's coming from a good place. Correct. And it goes both ways.
No, and with the team, back to the huddle concept, I think with these five points that you mentioned, I think these work out really well as a foundational piece for how we can conduct ourselves better in those huddles. And as one of the things that we're all about here on this podcast is Toastmasters, and we invited you to our Toastmasters meeting. This is a space that I would encourage shop owners to also visit to practice their skills, not only to feel better about their communication skills and making sure that they're effective in their approach, but how to run a meeting.
That's right.
As you saw as a guest, I would assume you noticed there's lots of people with roles to try to keep that meeting moving on track, begin on time, end on time, and everybody has a job.
Well, something that I really appreciate about what I saw from your meeting that you hosted, Craig, is there are also other people who have responsibilities during that meeting. And as leaders, we can empower our team members through the daily huddles, because a lot of us say, well, I don't know what to talk about on my daily huddle, or I don't really have anything to say, or we just feel like I'm the one who has to lead the daily huddle. That's not always the case. Empower your team to lead daily huddles. Say, hey, you know what? He is going to lead it on Tuesday. She's going to lead it on Wednesday. I'll take Thursdays. Diversify the daily huddles and who's leading those teams. You're empowering them for the sake of growth and development. And in the daily huddle, something I do want to mention is other concepts, other things to implement is we talked about setting the tone by publicly praising. I think identifying wins, what gets celebrated gets repeated. So identify some wins from team members throughout the meeting. There's 2 different, what I call culture creations that I like to share with my clients. And this is a way that we can help improve culture. And one of them is called the word of the day trend. And a word of the day trend is where we just go around the huddle and say, all right, Craig, what's your word of the day? All right, Josh, what's your word of the day? All right, John, what's your word of the day? And all we're doing is we are collectively hearing each other and identifying where each other's mindset is.
Ooh, that's good.
And you as a leader get to say, okay, my word of the day is what? Communication. Let's say it's communication. Let's say consistency, whatever it is. Say, hey, my word of the day is communication. I want to make sure that I'm being proactive with my communication today with my guests, with my team. So I'm asking for accountability on communication.
Oh, this is good. Yeah. Yeah. You're getting the team members involved. It's no longer just a briefing where you're up there.
That's right.
Dishing out orders, and it's
directive,
you, the
right?
briefer, them, the briefed. And that's the way this conversation is going to go. This is a conversation now. It's a two-way street. And these people have been freed to begin to share something that they are working on. There's a great book. I don't know if you've read this or not. It's Turn the Ship Around. The author, who's the author? It is David Marquette. The story of the USS Santa Fe submarine, a nuclear class submarine, had the worst reenlistment rates in the Navy. This captain, he comes in, completely turns around with this leader model, and it's powerful. And I try to implement elements of this when I have an autoflow huddle with my team. Each week, we begin with our weekly kickoff. And for a remote team, this is an important piece of connection. And one of the things that I've noticed is better is when I'm not the guy doing all the talking. And they get to tell me what their objectives are and what they're planning to do for the week. And it's a simple, I think David Marquette called it certify, don't brief, if I recall correctly in the book. And I'm going to have to pull this one up again. It might be a fun one to discuss with you. It's much more powerful because they come to the huddle or the brief, the meeting, prepared to contribute when they know they have a part.
There's a great quote from Chris Voss. He wrote a book called Never Split the Difference.
That's a great one. Yes. I was thinking about when you were talking about the questions.
Yeah.
Got to find that black swan.
It is a fantastic book. And towards the end of the book, there's a quote that stood out where he says, when the pressure is on, we don't rise to the occasion. We fall to our highest level of preparation. And when we are working with our team and empowering our team, to your point, they're coming prepared because they know that they're going to have a voice. They know their opinions matter. They know that their ideas will be considered. And so this is a way that we can drive that connection before the content. So one of the culture creations was word of the day. The other is what I call high-low buffalo. And my family actually does this at the dinner table or whenever we have all the whole family here. High-low buffalo. We go around the table and we will ask for each person to share their high, which is their best part of the day, their low, which is their worst part of the day, because we also know, as I shared earlier, not every day is going to be a good day. We can find the good in every day. Just because you had a worst part of your day doesn't mean it was a bad day.
And where's the buffalo come in, Josh? I'm dying.
This is the best part. The buffalo is the strangest, most bizarre, wildest, weirdest thing of your day. And this particular point is a massive conversation starter. And I promise you, if you implement the word of the day trend and or high-low buffalo, you're going to drive communication, drive alignment in culture. You're going to drive connection before content.
Yes.
If you do these things.
Yes. Oh, those are two great takeaways. The high-low buffalo, the good thing that happened in your day, the low thing that happened in your day, and this weird oddball thing.
Yes, that's right.
That's fun.
That's right.
It's
always fun.
That sounds like a good one to get the teenagers coming home burnt out from school talking.
That is, and it is so we have 4 kids, Craig. So 13, 12, 11, and 8. So
okay, you're a little bit younger than mine. Yeah, but
that age
group,
spread. Yeah, it is. Yeah. You hear some weird and wild things.
Yeah, well, and you obviously understand. And one of the areas I'm in right now is literally the full spread of teenage years. My kids range right now from 13, 15, and 19. So all of them in the full spectrum of full-fledged teenage mode. And so naturally, I become very passionate about how to communicate better with teenagers because, well, I'm studying that very point on a daily basis and practicing. Guys, I'm trying.
Keep on studying because you'll become the master and I don't need your help. Trust me.
But here's the thing. And I remember, as we all do, you come home, people want to talk to you, and you just don't feel like sharing much yet. And that's very normal. And our teams, a lot of times, guys, these are hard days. They're going to come into the shop. They're going to be a little burnt out too. They don't want to necessarily be at work compared to being off with their families or fishing or whatever it is that they want to do. Having a more, not necessarily a laid back approach, but I would say it's a casual approach to keep people opened up. And when people are opened up, it's a lot easier to communicate how much we care about each other and receive
So
that.
true. So good.
Yeah, this is good. And the word of the day trend, that is great, because the word of the day is a Toastmasters thing too.
Okay.
But it's one word that gets picked by one person and everybody tries to use it in their speech. But this is different. This is each person having a word of the day. And ooh, I like it.
It's always fun too, Craig, especially with technicians, because they're the ones who are, you're going to hear some really colorful words.
There a 4-letter rule?
There's not a 4-letter rule, but trust me. And here's the thing. I say, let's welcome anything and everything early on, because what we see is a culture shift over time. I have 2 clients who shared with me earlier this year. Both of them, they don't even know each other, but both of them shared a very similar story. And it came from 2 technicians who don't know each other, but they started the word of the day trend, and both technicians who were early on kind of speaking negatively about the word of the day. Like, it just really was just like, what a waste of time. This doesn't make sense, whatever. And after a few weeks, it's like, hey, are we still doing the word of the day? Like these guys are the ones who are like, hey, are we still doing it? Because
I thought of a good one.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, that's the thing. So, and by the way,
first one would be more awkward, I'm sure.
By the way, I said technician, but I think Carm would appreciate. I actually meant to say mechanical and technology specialist.
There you go.
That is what I meant to say.
Yes.
So we are driving change together, man.
That is right. It's a language shift out there for sure.
Yeah.
No, that's great stuff, Josh. Wow. There's a lot of takeaways on this, and I'm glad this is recorded because you were dropping gems of wisdom throughout this thing. And I caught that book recommendation. It was the coaching book you had. I have my note.
Yes. The Coaching Habit. Yep.
Coaching Habit. Who was the author of that again?
Michael Bungay Stanier.
Michael Bungay Stanier.
Yeah.
Nice. All right. We'll have to try to get some links to that in our show notes here for you folks. And wow. All right, Josh, there's going to be other conversations. I already know this. I follow what you do out there. I've been following you when you were with Christian Brothers as well. Best of luck to you in your endeavors with Limitless Leadership. I think it's always great to have voice of various experiences. And I think it's great someone tossed you that extra magazine here. Boy, I hope this can be like some more ammo for you as well. But here's the thing, folks. This show is not possible without the support of our sponsors. So thank you once again to each of you who make this possible. And also, don't forget, we have some great shows here on the Aftermarket Radio Network, and those are hosted by some pretty amazing people. We have Matt Fonslow hosting the Diagnosing the Aftermarket A to Z. We have Carm Capriato, of course, with his Remarkable Results Radio. You'll hear stories and plenty of great industry experts coming there to share their wisdom. And don't forget Hunt Demarest and his show, Understand the Numbers of Your Business by the Numbers. Hunt Demarest actually has one of the, I think, least sexy topics that there is to discuss in the aftermarket, but I promise you, he makes it fun. You have to absolutely check it out. You will learn a lot. And then we have Coach Chris Cotton with AutoFix, and he has his show, The Weekly Blitz. Coach Chris Cotton, amazing insights and wisdom. And don't forget Kim and Brian Walker, the Automotive Repair Marketing Podcast. They are absolutely wonderful there. And there's so many things in communication and marketing that could relate. And we're going to have some overlap on some topics on that coming up very soon. So with that, Josh, what's next for you, my friend?
Man, great question, Craig. I mean, we are doing some trainings here coming up next spring. We're still trying to figure out some dates for that. But if anyone is interested in just jumping on a free discovery call, that's really what I'm looking for. You know, we are thankful and blessed with all the clients that we do have, but we want to help any way that we can. We love this industry. We want to continue to drive positive change in the industry. And so if you're interested in jumping on a call, give me a shout. Happy to connect.
And Josh, you're one of the great voices in the industry. Thank you so much for being here. And thank you to our listeners. Please remember always, before you go out there and speak up, listen up here. We appreciate you so much.
You've been listening to Speak Up, Effective Communication with Craig O'Neill on the Aftermarket Radio Network. Follow Craig on your favorite podcast listening app and on his YouTube channel. Let him know what you'd like him to speak up about. Craig is all for advancing the automotive service aftermarket.